They claimed it was just another call in a peaceful neighborhood, a normal check. However, when the police vehicle screamed to 8, changed completely as the vehicle came to a stop and 2 officers leaped out with their pistols drawn while assisting. Her elderly neighbor with grocery loading, a woman dressed for the gym, found herself face down on the pavement. Nothing except cold metal cuffs pushing at her. With no explanations or queries, she was having trouble breathing, and her knees and wrists were pressing into her back. Her name Cole, Jasmine. Her offense. She was the right kind of person. Just of someone, not of a particular individual, a black person. A person strolling while black in an area where rumors still circulate behind closed doors. The type of setting where authority wears a badge at night and a smile during the day. She had already experienced injustice, but this time it was individual. Jasmine wasn't just a resident after all. She was neither a stranger nor a tourist. As a federal agent, she was now pinned to the ground by an FBI investigator who had been deployed to uncover wrongdoing inside the same department, and time was running out. 7 minutes. It took that long for everything to shift, for the real narrative to start coming to light, for truth to cut through the stillness. Someone filmed the whole affair across the street. Mr. is a retired veteran. Radon Torres was shocked to see the woman who had assisted him in shoveling his driveway the previous winter punished like a criminal. Soon after, the video would go viral, sparking outrage around the country. Hashtags calling for accountability, and nobody anticipated the public reckoning. However, Jasmine remained silent at the time. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She gazed at the sky while hearing the officers make jokes and defend their behavior. She must have, one of them whispered. They always do. The other person laughed. Done something. And suddenly they served as a reminder of how quickly dignity can be lost, how unchecked authority turns becoming a threat. This is about more than one woman. It concerns a system that far too frequently fails thievery individuals it purports to safeguard. It concerns racial profiling, civil rights. What occurs when arrogance and accountability collide? However, above all, it's regarding Jasmine's subsequent actions. Due to the fact that everything they believed they were aware of her, power, justice, and control, on the verge of being turned upside down. This isn't just a story, so stay with us. Of unfairness. It serves as an example of what true authority looks like. Additionally, when the truth ultimately intervenes without knocking, the door is kicked down. Jasmine Cole didn't select Millstone by chance. It was peaceful, away from the bustle of the city, with well-kept gardens and a people who took great pleasure in their traditions. However, beneath its immaculate exterior, anxiety boiled throughout the community, unspoken, unregulated, and shielded by a network of uniformed good old guys. The FBI sent her there for just that reason. Jasmine had experience. With more than 10 years of expertise looking into police misbehavior and human rights breaches, she had established a reputation for as the Bureau's silent weapon, accurate, systematic, and unflappable. She didn't require spotlights or sirens. She required time, access, and quiet. All three were given by Millstone. She pretended to be a private data analyst, rented a small house on the outskirts of Oakview Avenue, moved in quietly, and blended in. However, she observed everything. More significantly, she took notes on everything. She saw the patterns right away. Black and Latino drivers are disproportionately targeted by traffic stops, regular grocery store searches that inexplicably ignored, white patrons and tailies of missing bodies footage taken after fights that, for some reason, usually resulted in a person of color being hospitalized or worse. However, the street cops were not the true aim. The leader of the community, Lieutenant Russell Keller, was their division of enforcement. Charming in public, yet vicious in private, despite receiving numerous accusations for harassment, tampering with evidence, and excessive force, his unit somehow managed to safe. Jasmine was close to changing it, which was her job. She had covertly collected video, interviews, computer forensics, and the statements of whistleblowers. She had captured Keller issuing orders to intimidate activists on tape. She had proof of fabricated arrest reports, She even deciphered encrypted communications indicating a wider network of cover-ups involving a local judge and the police union. The case was prepared, however, something had gone wrong. Only 24 hours prior to her scheduled submission, she got a signal from her boss at the DOJ. The case was approved for federal intervention. Knowing that justice was finally catching up, Jasmine grinned. She prepared to permanently vanish from Millstone by encrypting her files and uploading them to a safe cloud server. One last market visit. A final act of kindness for her elderly neighbor. Then she would sapper once more into the darkness, allowing the Bureau to carry out its duties. They were the first to move, though. She was unaware that Samini had learnt about a mole inside the department. Additionally, they discovered that a compromised email's metadata, the IP address in the attachment, pointed directly back to Oakview Avenue. Jasmine. She had entered a setting right away. Officially, her cover was still in place. Keller, however, wasn't waiting for papers on the ground. He issued an ambiguous "all troops on the lookout for" and apprehend suspects who match intelligence leaks. Just a green light for plausible deniability. No warrants, no name sand. 2 eager cops fell for it. Jasmine was now sitting in the rear in handcuffs of a patrol car. She remained composed and strategic. The cruiser's interior, the plastic wall pressed into her knees, and the air smelt of dust and stale coffee. One officer gave a tense laugh, while the other, perplexed by her silence, continued to stare into the rearview mirror. They were unsure about what to create of her. She wasn't crying or shouting. She was observing, calculating, listening. The groceries she never managed to unpack were melted on the floor of her home. Porch. Mr. Torres, her neighbor, was stunned and stood still. He'd seen Jasmine help him transport his wife to the emergency room while there was no ambulance. He had observed her picking up rubbish from the curb, helping out at the neighborhood library and provide after-school tutoring to children. He had now witnessed her being dragged out like a runaway. Something changed within him. He pulled out his phone and sent the just-captured footage to his private account. Then he pressed the share button. In the meantime, Jasmine's fingers moved a little in the handcuffs inside the cruiser, not leaving out of rhythm, but out of panic. Her palms were tapped with a silent pattern, Morse, a signal buried deep within her body. The time had come. As the cruise ship headed, Jasmine stayed motionless down Millstone Parkway, but her thoughts were racing. Years of she was instructed to wait by tactical training. Being patient was more than just a virtue, it was survival. She looked at the control panel. No audio logs, no camera. It was not a process. This was not in the book. What she already suspected was verified by her instincts. She wasn't being sent to booking by Keller. He was letting her disappear. She moved, the implanted chip in her bracelet, a common problem for undercover operatives, pinged her wrist slightly, GPS coordinates to an FBI satellite channel that is secure, silence after one tap. The window of opportunity was closing. Initially, the policeman engaged in small chat, while the other muttered. Keller remarked, "This one's priority." The first one made a comment about fitting the profile. Jasmine nearly grinned. They were still unaware of who they were carrying, or perhaps they were aware and simply didn't give a damn. In any case, they made the error, not her, and they were unaware of how near national shame, but someone else did. 50 miles away, within a concrete government building, Jasmine's emergency ping had just ended, and Special Agent in charge Howard Whitmore looked down at his tablet. Active. He called the command center after he froze in the middle of a budget conference and whispered, "I need the room. Pull Agent 6473's secure node. Make the Black Echo protocol active, instant deployment." 3 black suburban vehicles departed the federal facility in less than 3 minutes, where they were coming for extraction. Not explanations, and the windows were darkened. The sirens dark. Jasmine, meantime, said in the car, "You know you're going to regret this." "What did you say?" The cop in the passenger seat turned, annoyed. Jasmine grasped his glance. "I stated that it would take 7 minutes." "You just used 6, the driver sneered. "Lady, stop talking. It takes a federal response team to locate my whereabouts. However, There was something in his partner's tone that made her face look a little pale. Too composed, he felt strange, measured, and reached for the police radio. We're headed out with the suspect. Dispatch. Do we have a case file yet? Stand by for more. Static, then silence, then negative when he returned to Millstone. The footage that Mr. Torres had uploaded received 1,000 views. 10,000 views, and then a local reporter's attention, Twitter account, followed by the email of a national civil rights attorney. By the 7th minute, the video had more than 90,000 views, and hashtags were created #wrongwoman, #FBI and Millstone, #justice for Jasmine. The algorithm was bolstered by content that was hungry for anger and justice, and then the quote witter. If they've seized her, this is more significant than the crooked policing that was exposed in Westfield last year. We are aware. Jasmine closed her eyes inside the cruiser, and the vehicle switched off the major road and onto a dirt trail that led behind the old mill. The type of location that was not depicted on maps, that had no trees, muck, whispers, streetlights, and no cameras. However, a new sound filled the woods as the automobile slowed to a stop. Low tires, several sets, doors slamming, boots rolling. Rumbling. After 7 minutes, Jasmine smiled for the first time that day. And then there was a knock at the cruiser window. It was a man in a dark suit, not local police tactical vest, with the image of a federal agent emblazoned on his breast. Exit car, he gently addressed the driver. The driver paused in confusion, asking, "Who the hell are you?" "The federal." Agent displayed his identification. "I am the individual who witnessed you abduct my undercover agent in a live video that was seen by more than when the entrance was opened by 100,000 people." The two officers froze, and Jasmine tipped her. She didn't have to speak louder since the facts spoke for themselves. "I told you, less than 30 seconds. And the confrontation near the old mill was shorter than any badge. However, it broke the facade of authority that Millstone's police force had established over the years. When the driver eventually Jasmine came out of the cruiser after unlocking it, her hands still in handcuffs, her body injured, but her stance straight, her gaze flickered defiantly and dryly at Special Agent White's. I had to wait till she said, "You've been here long enough." Whitmore didn't grin back. "Legal wants your face to be clean for the live feed to verify." Whitmore didn't bother, and local officers stood motionless, white, and babbling half-answers that no one asked for. Engaged. A federal investigator with a pending DOJ case was just unlawfully detained by you. Assignment. From the time you pulled up on Oakview, you were under surveillance. Your radios were blocked for a reason. 3 federal agents immediately lifted their rifles as the taller officer's hand twitched towards his belt. Whitmore cautioned, "Don't." And the cop blinked, understanding that this was the whole force of the federal government descending on the county's customary game of threats and immunities, their local government. Jasmine turned to Nolan, a younger police officer in his mid-30s, he could no longer see her in the eyes, so she smirked as she pressed her face into the cruiser window. She took a step. "You asked if I had done something earlier, so let me get closer. Wrists still shackled, respond immediately." Her tone sliced like a silk-wrapped dagger. "I've disassembled 5 Nolan's throat bobbed, and I was going to make this one the 6th. Departments like yours before lunch." The trees behind they were silent, but Mr. Torres's phone continued to capture every second. And that already viral video is had a follow-up that would be broadcast by sunset on all news networks, dispatchers muttered while phones at Millstone. Police department glowed like slot machines. Officers watched the video on computer screens, some in shock, others in panic. And then the email arrived. All user access was denied. Internal systems were closed, and a notice flashed across their monitors. "A federal seizure is underway. Please comply right away." Keller was no ordinary activist, and Chief Harmon slammed his office door and called her while muttering obscenities. She was FBI, he screamed. Keller's normally sardonic and silky voice no-cracked. "I'm taking care of it." However, time was running out, and Jasmine had left no loose ends. Keller made a deadly mistake on his following move. He rushed out of the convoy. believing he could catch it and silence Jasmine before she arrived at a government office. Department, past a TV van that was waiting, and into the parking lot, only to walk straight into another federal caravan. Were already guarding the structure. Whitmore advanced with deliberate testers. "You are Lieutenant Russell Keller," he said, displaying a sealed indictment. "Arrested for conspiring to violate civil rights, obstructing justice, and misuse of authority under false pretenses." Keller's lips curled into something smiling and sneering at the same time. "This is a mistake." Whitmore opened his phone and tapped the screen. The sound of Keller's voice could be heard clearly. More audio followed, along with instructions to fabricate. "I don't care what she said. She's not one of us. Delete the body cam. Retaliation against journalists, target minority neighborhoods, and make arrests." Whitmore looked him in the eye and stated, "You weren't being clever. You were being recorded." At the federal field office, this time, Jasmine was not the subject. Rather, she was the one sitting in the middle of a sterile interview room. Evidence bags piled around her, including Keller's hard disks, confiscated. Documents, burner phones, and MK unit with an encrypted radio identification. Agents proceeded systematically, cataloging each item. When Jasmine produced a sealed envelope from inside her coat, one of them halted. She pushed it over the table and added, "This is from Officer Graves. He flipped 3 days ago." A declaration from a former insider described how Millstone's prosecutors and judges had repressed Nishivoria reports in return for quiet political endorsements and favors. After a long period of stillness, someone eventually stated, "We're going to." Jasmine did not request fame, nor did she make an appearance on the morning shows or grant interviews. 3 days later, she entered the Millstone Town Hall meeting without announcing herself. Her visage had changed from that of the woman on the video to that of the woman who revealed a malfunctioning machine as she stood in front of a throng of local residents, some still living in denial, some ashamed, and others angry, shed and bat an eye. "I came here because I thought that internal transformation was possible. And you all witnessed what was going on, so I stayed because I knew that silence never benefits anyone. You just didn't want to talk first." The room was silent. There was just one man in the audience rows. He was elderly, possibly in his 70s, and wore a crisply ironed plaid shirt. "Ma'am," he responded softly, gripping his headgear in both hands. I've spent my entire life here. Yes, I have seen things, but we didn't believe that we could alter it." "We had no idea how." Jasmine remarked. "You always knew," with unwavering gaze. "You just decided on comfort over justice." The words were louder than any loudhailer, but they weren't yelled, because they were real. Press vans packed the street outside the municipal hall. The story of the undercover FBI agent exposing local police corruption had already garnered national attention. Journalists pleaded for testimony as the operation uncovered years of civil rights violations in Millstone, but Jasmine, whose job was to rebuild, not to perform, strolled right by them. What had been damaged? It would take months or even years to figure out what to do next. The most difficult aspect wasn't the court cases, appeals, new leadership, or the police department's federal monitor, the legal job, which involved addressing a society that had let injustice fester in silence. The last turn took place in a classroom, not a trial or a news conference. 2 weeks following the procedure, Jasmine went to Millstone High School without a uniform, a rifle, or a badge. Just Ash brought a flash drive and a Navy jacket to a senior civics class, where she plugged it in and played a compilation video. Many accounts from locals, both young and elderly, black and brown, detailing years of profiling. The room was quiet. They had never been requested to observe their own neighbors out of fear or embarrassment. Speak the truth. Jasmine turned to the pupils as the lights returned. "These systems don't fix themselves," she remarked, adding that things worsen until someone takes enough chances to stop it. That risk may be a vote, a phrase, a video, or your job. Determine the end of the pause. A student held up her hand. A reserved girl in large-eyed, braided person in the back row. "Were you afraid, Jasmine?" She enquired nodded after pausing. "Daily, but you can't let fear dictate your decisions. If it does, you're merely a badge without a soul, a uniform without a purpose. Shaglinsed at the instructor. This town will be theirs to inherit. We must prevent them from inheriting the same silence. Returning, the sun hung low outside. Jasmine got into her unidentified vehicle. On the seat next to her was a new case file, another system, another town, a different name. Millstone, however, would always remember her. In addition to wearing a badge, but because she got up when things went wrong. For truth, not for herself. Truth did not recoil. Jasmine Cole sat quietly in a soundproof federal building 3 days after the town hall. Conference room, watching documents scroll by on the wall-mounted screen. What had started off as A1 Police Department's small-scale investigation into civil rights abuses had now devolved into something much larger. Corruption throughout multiple counties, evidence suppression, and bribery, judges and a strong union legal staff ready to defend themselves with all of their might. Jasmine, however, wasn't squirming. This was what nobody outside the Bureau was aware of yet. She hadn't come to Millstone by herself. All of this was a part of Project Quiet Verdict, a federal program aimed at revealing concerted misconduct in local law enforcement agencies, particularly those protected by decades of old money politics and insider agreements. Millstone was more than a mere target. Jasmine had successfully completed the test, but the true twist was about to happen. Jasmine had been discreetly promoted to a lead by the DOJ's Civil Rights Section, advisory function. She was doing more than just collecting intelligence. She was now in charge of the litigation plan. From in the background, she was compiling case files on Keller and his group, as well as the network offtos who enable them. Judges who rejected legitimate allegations without conducting a review, prosecutors who declined to accuse violent police officers, and even a state lawmaker whose campaign received significant funding from the same police union, getting a lawyer. Each and every sealed file, financial trail, name, Jasmine and her group was tracking everything down. Each of the cops who had previously pulled her into the car was now dealing with internal review. Officer Nolan has previously allowed his casual prejudice to continue unchecked, became a whistleblower after his phone was found to contain defamatory text by federal investigators. He told Jasmine, "I didn't sign up for this," during an off-the-record debrief. They instructed us to profile those who didn't seem to belong, and if we didn't, we were moved, or worse. Not to pardon him, Jasmine listened. Budo comprehend the climate of ambition and fear that fostered corruption, forcefully. You still made your choice, she stated. But now you have a chance to make a different one. In the meantime, the public's reaction was explosive outside the system. Attorneys for civil rights filed federal lawsuits on behalf of locals who had been unjustly imprisoned for a number of years. Ever discreet, Jasmine supported several of these claims with censored material. One video demonstrating the video of a scared teen being stopped and yelled at by 3 policemen for appearing suspicious went viral. Hours after being freed. When combined with Jasmine's research, it turned into the town is unable to dispute the abuse trend. Local companies once went silent and started apologizing in public. Contributions to the reform of criminal justice money soared. In town, a church modified its sign to say, "Speak even if you're the most significant turn of events," however, was when Jasmine received an anonymous parcel at the Bureau. Within was a flash drive and a handwritten letter. According to the note, "I couldn't live with it no longer." An audio recording from 2018 was on the drive. Franklin Bowers, a judge in talk with Lieutenant Keller. One could hear the judge telling Keller to destroy the complaint files against an especially outspoken community organizer. He said, "She's making too much noise. Do what you have to, just keep it quiet." Weeks later, the organizer passed away in a vehicle collision. A lot of people thought it was suspicious. The DOJ revisited the case in light of this new evidence, not just as unlawful death, but as a possible plot to thwart the rule of law. Jasmine listened to the audio repeatedly while she sat in her office. The judge's composed tone, the informal brutity. She gritted her teeth. This apple wasn't bad. It was an orchard. Jasmine responded by holding her first press conference in public. She didn't do it for attention, but the narrative had become too large to conceal. Wearing a smart navy suit, she stood at the podium. Reporters are waiting for every word. One officer or even one person isn't the focus of this department, she stated. It concerns a system that, if left unchecked, turns into its own predator. What transpired in Across America, Millstone takes place in peaceful settings where quietness is valued and accountability is viewed as an insult. Rewarded with promotions. However, not to this day. A reporter inquired, "Dodo, you think of yourself as a hero?" Jasmine shook her head, saying, "No, I think of myself as a governmental servant who carried out her duties. The people who continue to live under such systems on a daily basis are the true heroes." Another reporter yelled, "What's next for you? Find the courage to speak, to resist, to survive?" Jasmine hesitated. Now that I have a complete map in front of me, Millstone was only one piece of the puzzle. Back in town, the numerous policemen quit as a result of the effects of her work starting to affect daily life. A new interim police chief, an outsider with experience in civil rights, was selected, and body cams were required. Rules were followed. A civilian monitoring board was established by the neighborhood community center, and Jasmine didn't have topsy-turvy. Having faith in the groundwork, she went back to her bureau office to prepare for the next assignment. However, not everyone welcomed the change, even when processes were overhauled. One evening as they were leaving the building, Jasmine saw her. Government vehicle's tires were cut, and there was a little note inside, under the windscreen, wrong side. 2 words, no threats, there's no incorrect side, Jasmine said, holding the paper for a second before letting it flutter to the sidewalk. Unless you are afraid of the truth. She realized something more profound at that time. The system's exposure isn't the end. Only the beginning, as 10 more murderers are standing in queue, disguised as authorities for everyone that is killed, was shielded by the public's apathy. But now that apathy was eroding, and the name Jasmine Cole had come to represent change, not only in terms of policy. But as the sun was just starting to rise above Washington, D.C., when Jasmine, with coffee in hand, Cole watched the city come to life from the Bureau building's rooftop. She had just closed the 4 years. Legal schools would reference the 94-page federal report on the Millstone case. The headlines had already changed, with new names and issues, but her job wasn't about making headlines. It was about the calm moment when a child entered after the cameras had stopped filming, when a mother stopped recoiling at nighttime sirens, school realized their community was finally paying attention. Jasmine wasn't gullible. She understood that the law began to signify protection rather than persecution. The system had fractured, but it was not fixed and never would be. Something fresh could bloom through that crack. Her phone buzzed as she gazed over the city. It was a text from Mr. Torres, 3 words in Millstone. "Thank you, Agent." She grinned gently, recalling the expression in his eyes that day. The suffering, the embarrassment, and the silent bravery required to record, rather than he turned away with only his phone, no electricity, no legal training, no badge, no his conscience. However, in a society where law enforcement too frequently, institutional abuse, racial profiling, and cruelty go unpunished. Jasmine's story was more than a federal, it was a moral reckoning, not only for the people in uniform, but also for all the people who stood by and said, "It's not missense. In reality, no one is protected by silence." For years, Jasmine had entered spaces where she was undervalued because she was too feminine, too black and too poised, but underneath that serene exterior was a storm, driven by all the injustices she had seen, all the reclosed case she vowed to revisit one day, and the family she had consoled. She was quiet and methodical, which made her hazardous to anyone who needed commotion to hide. Remembering the little girl who had asked whether she was afraid, she acknowledged that she had been and occasionally still is, but fear wasn't, that apathy was the adversary. Ultimately, Jasmine didn't bring down with the truth and the determination to act upon it. She overcame Millstone's crooked system with a pistol or a badge. She brought to light a lesson that the world is constantly attempting to forget. True justice does not arise when the powerful permit it, When the tenacious demand it, it appears. If you've watched this far, perhaps you'll feel that as well. Perhaps you've witnessed unfairness in your neighborhood, heard it in a corridor, experienced it during a traffic stop. I saw that in a store. Now, what are you going to do with that? To maintain the line, you don't have to be an FBI agent. All you have to do is recognize the issue and not allow it to stand. I'm Jasmine Cole, and I don't wear a badge to make me feel significant. Instead, I wear is necessary for someone to do so. If this tale touched you, tell others about it. Keep in mind that nothing changes when you don't speak. But you may sign up for Radio Life, tales for more potent tales that expose justice, truth, and the resilience of human dignity against authority. We reveal the system one fact at a time, not just stories.